Let's eat grandma. But first, let's talk about grammar. Specifically, these pieces of grammar that are most likely for you to use in your writing. We're going to start at the end and talk about the grammar you use to end a sentence. The period, exclamation point, and question mark. The exclamation point is meant to convey big emotions. You're crazy! If your characters are, say, in a screaming match, you'll probably use a lot of exclamation points. But if they're shouting across a canyon giving instructions, they might not need an exclamation point. This is where dialogue tags come in to establish your characters are yelling. But if they're giving a character a shopping list, an exclamation point will convey much more emotion than is actually there. And I feel like exclamation points are synonymous with being loud, but not necessarily. If your characters are hiding and arguing, they'll be whispering, but you'll still want to use the exclamation points. A question mark is meant to convey a question. Are you crazy? It's not that complicated, but it is fun how a question mark can completely change the meaning of a sentence. Dennis knew exactly what he was doing versus Dennis knew exactly what he was doing. Then periods are just as easy. Unless you're using one of the other two, it's how you're going to end your sentence. 90% of sentences are ended with a period. The only thing that may trip someone up about a period is that it can be used to abbreviate. Doctor versus doctor. If you're using an uncommon abbreviation or your sentence is structured weird, it can throw people off, making them think the sentence is ending when it's not. But you should be able to see those problems and restructure the sentence to fix the abbreviation during a reread. God knows, I've reread plenty of my work that seemed like it made perfect sense at the time, but when I came back to it, it was complete gibberish. Moving on to sentence interruptions, ellipses, end dash, em dash, and hyphens. Real quick, em dashes are long, end dashes are medium, and hyphens are short. A hyphen is used to make compound words. Think 22. There's a dash between the 20 and the 2, making it one word. The same can be used for things like mother-in-law, one of a kind, or well-adjusted. With the hyphen, you're taking multiple words and basically smushing them all together, and if you remove the hyphen, it can change the meaning of the words. Let's say you have one of a kind versus one of a kind. The first implies something unique, but without the hyphens, you can infer the opposite, that it's just one of many kinds of things like it. Then there's end dash, which is used to imply rain. It's January through October. We need somewhere between 20 and 28 pieces. Examples like that. And again, skipping an end dash changes the meaning. I'm saying between 20 and 28 because language is weird and that's how you convey end dash verbally. If you wrote 20 and 28 in writing, you could mess it up so they think they need a grand total of 48 of something. Plus, it just looks chunkier and is versatile in a way end dash isn't, and that can give end dash a lot more strength for its specific purpose. Then lastly, there's ellipses and em dash. I put them together because for a long time I used ellipses in place of em dash, and that's an issue I see a lot of writers make. And ellipses is used to convey a sort of trailing off of a sentence. You look great, or you look great. And em dash is used to indicate a sudden break. You look great. And you will convey very different tones depending on which one you use. I want to cut in here to add a quick note on em dashes. So an em dash is not the end of a sentence. You never ever capitalize the word after an em dash. You can, however, add a space between the em dash and the word that comes after it, or you don't have to add a space. Both ways are grammatically correct. It's all about consistency. Next, let's talk about parentheses and brackets. They're similar, but not interchangeable. And there's actually more forms of brackets that, again, aren't interchangeable. But you're not likely to use these in your writing, so I'm sticking to the two most basic ones. Parentheses are used to add information that isn't necessary to the sentence. She explained nicely, or so she thought. how the plan could work. It can give you additional information to a scene. The desk, one of many, was covered in dust, or teach you something about the character. My belief, at least at the time, was that this was wrong. But it's not the only way to add this information. You can use em-dashes again, or you can use commas, but not always interchangeably. Commas are formal, dashes are informal, and parentheses are in the middle. And the information you put in parentheses is something that could be removed from the sentence without changing its meaning. Em-dashes tend to highlight what they're around, and commas will make the sentence flow better. And it's up to you to use them based on what tone you want to convey. Next, let's move on to dashes, semicolons, and colons, and not the organ. Now, what you're going to do is look at the time. Those two dots between the hour and minutes is a colon. That's one of its uses. Another is to give emphasis. There was just one question left. Where was she? Another is to add to titles. And the third is to introduce a list. We need a few things: eggs, bacon, cheese, the souls of our enemies, etc. A semicolon is used to connect sentences. If you have two sentences, she was fine, she just needed to rest a moment, you can combine them to one with a semicolon. She was fine, she just needed to rest a minute. Again, this will change your tone and make the sentence flow together more, and it can help keep your writing interesting. If you have a paragraph full of nothing but short sentences, you can add a semicolon where necessary to elongate your sentences, and that will help keep the reader engaged. A slash is used for fractions to separate relationships or alternatives. With relationships, it can be used to indicate things that are in opposition to something, good, evil, or it can be used if something has multiple names that can apply to it. Workshop / factory / warehouse. And with alternatives, it can be used in cases of if, when, or and, or. Basically, it's used to combine two things that seem to be in opposition to each other. Now, I want to move on to my old friend, dialogue, and the grammar you'll use with it, specifically quotation marks and apostrophes. Quotation marks are simple. If you're quoting someone, put what they said in quotation marks, along with the punctuation at the end, the period, exclamation points, question marks, and commas. Anything other than that goes outside the quotation marks. If you're writing dialogue, you need to use quotation marks to indicate someone's talking. Now, I do combine apostrophes in dialogue if you have a character quoting another character. Instead of additional quotation marks, put apostrophes. Apostrophes are also used for contractions and possession. The symbol in haven't, couldn't, wouldn't are all apostrophes, allowing two words, have not, could not, would not, to be smushed together. It can also be used to omit letters, 'cause instead of because, or going instead of going, but those examples are informal in a way wouldn't isn't, so be careful about when and where you use them. You also need to be careful about words like your, which can be its own word, or two words smushed together if it has an apostrophe or not. And you can also use it to indicate possession, and this is where meanings can change. I'm at the home of my grandparents. I'm at my grandparents' house. I'm at my grandparents' house. The first one doesn't need an apostrophe because you've already indicated possession. The second indicates that the house belongs to someone, but it's singular. It's one person who is your grandparent, rather than two grandparents. And the third indicates plural and possession. If you need to indicate something belongs to multiple people, the apostrophe always goes at the end. I also want to add a quick tidbit for names that end with an S, like Carlos. If you're trying to put an apostrophe to establish possession, then you can either put an apostrophe, then another S, or you can just put an apostrophe, no extra S. It's all about consistency. Neither is necessarily grammatically incorrect. And last and most daunting of all is the all-important comma. Commas are one of the most diverse pieces of punctuation. I've already talked about how you can use them to convey information in the middle of a sentence and in dialogue. You also use them between lists, eggs, bacon, and mayo, and even this can be tricky because you could say eggs, bacon, and mayo with the comma before the and or no comma before the and. And both ways are grammatically correct. it's also about consistency. A comma can be used to join two clauses similar to a semicolon, but not exactly. What the commas joining cannot be complete sentences on their own. You use commas before but and if, however, you use commas after directly addressing someone. Dennis, stop that. You use it to set off dialogue. You use commas with numbers like addresses. You use commas with big numbers. Basically, you go left to right, grouping the numbers into sets of 3, then you add the commas. You use commas when compounding adjectives. The tall, charming man fell down the stairs. And you use it whenever you take a breath in a sentence. And that's not all the punctuation in the world, or even everything you need to know about the punctuation I just talked about, but it's a starting point, because language is hard, but it's harder if you're bad at the basics. So, let's eat, Grandma!